Van Lingen. I hear you talk about Qabalah. Why is that? Too much attributions in your opinion about James Lee's his English Qabalah? It's a great example of Qabalah. Qabalah is because people who speak Kabbalistically are mostly just saying freaking nonsense. It's a lot of what Intellekaya calls connect the dots. So it's just like, this number means this, and it's this color, and this color is this god, and this god is this other god, and this god is this Sephiroth, and this Sephiroth is this number. And it's just like on and on and on. It's like there's no center to it. There's no purpose to any of it. Everything is everything else. It's just blah. It's just like intellectual version of diarrhea or something. Everything's running together. I also think people think that once you give a Kabbalistic attribution to something, it somehow explains it. It doesn't. Saying this is a Sephiroth doesn't really explain anything. Especially because everyone's understanding of those Kabbalistic concepts are so flexible to begin with. I think there are some uses. I think it could potentially be a way to communicate certain concepts, certain vague, abstract concepts in a more coherent way. But the way it is used by people, I really think is just a bunch of waste of time. It's a bunch of nonsense. Like numerology is a really big example of it. So that leads into your next question, my opinion about James Lee's English Qabalah. I don't know what that is. I don't know him, I mean. I know what English Qabalah order and value is. I think that a new system of numerology, a new system of gematria is not going to do anything for anyone. Like, no one was ever prevented from doing their will because they didn't know gematria or they didn't know numerology. It's just not a relevant thing. Like, think about it. People put way too much weight into it as if it's like hard-coded into the universe, some kind of truth, like a Bible code written by God. But like, clearly that's not the case, especially when you just start applying random numbers to random letters. You're going to start finding patterns, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. If you add up every single word, you're going to find connections. And again, like we were talking about earlier, your mind is a pattern finder. It will find connections between things, and it will make it seem significant. That's basically its job, is to try to find significance in the world. And it messes up sometimes. Numerology is a good example of that. So English Qabalah order and value, like what value, no pun intended, does that have to me or anyone, really? Is it just to prove that he's the next reincarnation of Crowley? Does it unlock some kind of new meaning or anything like that? Or is it just a giant list of words that happen to correspond to each other, just like the 333 other versions of English Qabalah that people come up with? And that's the thing, is like, people are like, oh, well, those aren't correct, we gotta find the correct one. My entire point is the whole project is dumb. It doesn't make sense. There's no purpose to it, and even if it were correct, you can't imagine how it would affect anything at all. Unless you believe in this idea of like, there is some magical true attribution by God that God is like a cryptographer, troll, trickster, waiting for someone to decode the right attribution of the English language to do what? Open up the Book of the Law or something like that. I view the riddle of the Book of the Law the exact same way, which is that it's basically a waste of time, and people who waste all their time on it, it's almost like a trap for people that don't understand the actual message of the Book of the Law. The Book of the Law does not say like, figure out the code shall be the whole of the law. Like, it's about doing your will. It's about knowing your will and doing your will. What does that mean? Finding out your true nature and enacting it. How could numerology or a new system of numerology like affect that in any way? That's why I call things Qabalah. It's just like, you're lost in the Qabalah sauce, you know? Not you, but everyone. It's a really common thing, and people are also just like unnecessarily strict about certain interpretations. They're like, no, Babylon is Bina. It's not this other thing. Babylon is Bina. Like, really? Crowley was very flexible with understanding things. You can pretty much find Babylon in any Sephira if you're trying, just as an example. So it's one of those things where, like, with Qabalah, if it's done really well, really well, then yeah. And I think Crowley himself does it really well at times, and other times he definitely goes into Qabalah. Like Equinox to the Gods, for example, I'm just really not a fan of the Qabalah he does in there. Numerology, Gematria doesn't prove anything, you know? Doesn't prove anything. Like, the biggest coincidence in the world doesn't prove anything. It certainly doesn't prove the existence of creator human intelligences. So, Vision the Voice uses Qabalah to lift off the page, contrast little essays with philosophy's prosaic. Yeah, so Vision the Voice is a great example where Qabalah, like, makes a lot of sense because it's a symbolic language to communicate certain things. It certainly meant something to Crowley, at least, and then communicating it to other people is difficult because it's so vague, right? To say, like, Horus is Keter, well, you have to explain what your understanding of Keter is in the first place. We take for granted, again, I talk about this before, we take for granted that we talk about the same thing. Just because we're using the same word doesn't mean we understand it the same way, especially when we're talking about Kabbalistic concepts or any kind of, like, abstract spiritual concepts.